On October 31st, 2024, I filed a police report with the city of Cleveland stating that I had been raped by Marcus Perez, the head of the Office of Professional Standards of the Cleveland Division of Police. I have a definition of peace, a situation in which problems can and do arise, as is always the case where there is diversity. But there is a trusted system for fixing them. Rape happens. It shouldn't happen. It does happen. But my definition of peace is that we believe in the system to fix the problems. What I was told was we believe that it happened and we're going to do nothing about it. Cleveland has the most powerful civilian oversight body of the police to have ever existed anywhere in the United States. What we have seen is we have seen this city government do everything that they can to hamstring these bodies. They have been trying, and I believe at this point have succeeded in controlling these bodies. And so we all run around saying we have civilian oversight of the police in Cleveland, all the while we don't, because our city government has co-opted all of the hard work that went into creating these. For a while, I had decided I was going to just accept that this occurred and move forward with my life. That is until I was called to serve on a Cuyahoga County grand jury last summer. The prosecutor has no authority, but they wear suits and they tell you that they have authority. And these are just everyday people who just live in Cleveland and ended up on this grand jury. They don't know any better. And I didn't know any better either, but I could tell something that first day. They pushed cases through with nearly, if not zero, evidence if they wanted to. That's all it took. It just required them wanting to. And they would present it, however, they're very selective with what evidence they offer. And of course, you don't know what you don't know, so you don't know what to ask if they're not offering it. The combination of the presentation that the victim advocate gave that very first day when we were being trained, and the subsequent day in, day out of seeing how very, very, very low the bar is for what is referred to as probable cause for guilt, and whether the case continues on to the next phase of what will eventually be a trial or a plea deal. The bar was in hell. The bar was in hell. What I realized in all of that was that even though I didn't have much physical evidence of what had occurred, to me, in my case, I knew that the case would pass through a grand jury. That was the hinge reason that at least enabled me to do it. It is directly the link between me not doing it and me doing it. The entity that investigated this ultimately was the Attorney General's office, their BCI unit. And they called me and told me that the county was declining the case after the investigation, and that the reason was they believed I said no, but because we continued having sex during the rape, and they classified what occurred afterward as a relationship that occurred in the aftermath of this, which was never sexual before, it was never sexual after this incident. They felt they would not be able to convince a grand jury that it qualified as rape or sexual battery under the Ohio Revised Code. They tell us to go local. That's what they say, you know. Everything that's happening on the national stage, go local. I did that. Every step of the way with the police reform that I tried to enact was partially successful, largely not, was impeded by the city of Cleveland's government. Every step of the way. And we're all Democrats in this city, supposedly. And one of the big things that Democrats talked about in this last election and the one prior was that it's a fight for democracy. That's what was on the line. Democracy versus authoritarianism. And yet, every direction I turn, our Democrat leaders here locally, they don't seem to like democracy very much. They don't seem to really like civic engagement very much. They don't seem to like participatory governing very much. It kind of begs the question, do they like us very much? Do they like us? Do they like the community? Do they like the people who live here? Or do they see us as their enemy? Do they see us as little nuisances to kind of manage the law department here one of the metrics that they use for success is how many resident complaints they can quash. They refer to those people as liabilities. So not the people who commit harm, not the criminals, but the people who complain about being victims. Because those are the people who can sue the city, take our money, take our tax dollars. And so it makes sense from a very kind of clinical perspective. But what doesn't make sense is how people could be so much more committed to the short game than they are the long game. So instead of looking at the people who commit crimes as the liabilities, they look at the people who complain about them as the liabilities. The people who commit the crimes are the assets that they then protect. You notice patterns, as you're involved in this, and it shows you where people's compass is pointed. Is it pointed toward the real thriving of this community and the protection of its people? Or is it pointed toward quick fixes and easy outcomes and things that maintain a narrative and suppress anything in opposition to that? And let me tell you, folks, that is the definition of authoritarianism. When he was asked whether he considered himself to be part of the resistance to Donald Trump, our mayor, who is the president of the National Democratic Mayors Association, said he thinks that Clevelanders are tired of the resistance, which was his way of saying, no, I do not consider myself to be part of the resistance. I represent my people, and my people are not resistors. Not anymore. They're tired. At the time, I was fighting for lawful representation on the Community Police Commission, which I did not achieve. Fighting. My goodness, was I fighting for that? Why was I fighting so hard? Who was I fighting? You go so many rounds and God, you get tired. You get tired. You do get tired. Isn't that an interesting concept? You get tired of resisting at a certain point. But that's because you have a formidable opponent to you. And in every situation that I come across in this city, the opponent to the people who live here is our current government. The same people who then get on a podcast and say, Clevelanders are tired of the resistance. We are tired because you have beat us down. We have tried to resist. We've said no. But you see people who say no as liabilities. You see our determination as a threat. Because you just have a right to anything you want, right? You have the right to any and everything that you want. You could take whatever you want. You don't need our consent. Do you need our consent, really? I don't know. It doesn't seem like you think that you need our consent. But democracy is consent. Mr. Democrat Mayor, democracy is consent. I told you the reasons that the prosecutor gave for not prosecuting my case. One of which was that we continued having sex while the rape was occurring, even though they believed I said no. It's almost like once I was beat into submission, I stopped resisting for my own survival. I changed the whole narrative around in my head. When you're in a situation that you can't change, there's a response to that kind of trauma. A lot of us are familiar with fight, flight. There's also freeze and fawn. That fawn response. They believed I said no, but we continued having sex while I was being raped, and I continued to communicate with him afterward. I did. That's true, I did. Continue to communicate with him afterward, and to be honest with you, I was a absolute wreck in the aftermath, but I wasn't fully processing what had occurred. I told a friend of mine what had happened. A contemporaneous witness is what that's called. One of the people that the Attorney General did not interview. I said that I had technically said no, but I didn't want to talk about it like that. I didn't want to think about it like that. I didn't want to think about it like that. It was technically non-consensual, but I don't want to think about it like that. And so I didn't. I was, however, prescribed at the time a medication for PTSD for sleep. I don't take that anymore, and this is all before I kind of fully processed that non-consensual means rape. Anyway, I don't love how I reacted in the aftermath. I didn't want to think of what happened to me as what happened to me. That started immediately after I failed to stop what was happening from happening. And what I'd like to do is I would like to turn to some of the people who have bent the knee to people in power. People who have realized, you know what, I'm going to jump on this boat because they've bombed mine. and it's sinking, and I'm not going to make it. And my survival is important to me. So let me see if I can get on their boat. All of the grown men who are currently doing that with people in their lives, I'm not just talking about our government, just think about that moment when things shift, when you realize, I need to get on this boat because this ship is sinking. I have to save myself. God, I really don't like them. And one of the reasons is because they're the people who sunk my ship, but I have to save myself. That's called a fawn reaction. And you can convince yourself that you consented, but you consented under duress. That is called coercion. They didn't win you over fair and square. To say nothing of the fact that that's not how sexual relationships should ever operate. Winning someone over. Anyway, tired of the resistance. So, if we stop resisting, but more so if we stop trying to figure out how to build, they will tell us that we are just tired of resisting and they're just doing what we want. They will tell us that they will not prosecute our violators because somehow evidence after the fact of the violation is in any way relevant to the fact that it occurred. Somehow speaks to, did you really fight back enough? Did you really resist enough? There was something that Corey Lewandowski said. He said it same week that my case was declined by the prosecutor. This was about sending in the National Guard to democratic cities for us, to protect against us. Really depends at that point who is considered the us and who is considered the them when the time comes. I want you to keep in mind what Justin said about resisting, being tired of it, referring to illegals. Corey Lewandowski, senior advisor to Kristi Noem, said, "We want every sanctuary city to understand we can touch people, any place, anytime." That's what he said. What do you think Justin was doing when he said, I don't stand with my own people anymore? You think he was kind of bending the knee to Trump? Maybe he's fawning. Here's the problem. When a rape victim fawns in the course of a rape, the person she is saving or he is saving is themselves, is the one person. And the person that they're sacrificing is themselves. But in the case of governance, if Justin is fawning to the Trump administration, he's saving himself by sacrificing the rest of us. We are the body that keeps that score. He's sort of metaphorically the mind that gets to dissociate and run off into safety. Because when they come for us, when our federal government comes for us, I don't think that our city leaders will be by our side. I think that they will have already sold us out for their own protection. And they will tell us that we asked for it. They will tell us that we consented. That's what a vote is, in a sense. Consent. It is to say yes. But think about the voter turnout in Cleveland. How many of us say yes? How many of us say no? How many of us say nothing? For me, this all loops back onto the same stuff. Every time that the city obstructed the functioning of the Community Police Commission or the Office of Professional Standards, they could have done something else. They could have supported participation. They could have empowered the people who live here. They chose to do the opposite. They chose disempowerment. They didn't need to. That is the only place where my hope lives. I have had an experience with police reform here that has shown me the moments in real time where people with power take power away from the disenfranchised and make them disenfranchised. Not just the result, not just the feeling that my vote doesn't count so I don't vote, or the feeling that my voice doesn't matter so I don't say anything anymore, or that I'm so beat down that I don't even try to resist anymore. These were the moments where a soul was crushed. You could see the crushing. I have seen people choose authoritarianism over democracy. So I know what it means to choose democracy. When I got the declination of my case from the prosecutor, the experience that I had was one in which the man who did this to me raped my body, and the people who represent us and made that decision raped my spirit. They didn't kill it, and it was never theirs. They don't get to define my peace. They don't get to define what it means for me to be a patriot I am a patriot of this country. I'm a patriot of this city. Let's try to build that peace. We have ourselves. We have self-determination. We have democracy. Jill Lepore is an historian. She said something recently. Forms of tyranny succeed by destroying your determination. Let's build some more. Let me know how we can do that together.